Hello, powerful people. Welcome back to the Power at Work blog and to this blogcast. Really thrilled to have you here. Delighted. My name is Seth Harris. I'm a senior fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change, and I'm so proud to be able to host this very special Veterans Day blogcast. We're talking veterans and the labor movement. And we have two guests who are right in the middle of that nexus of military veterans and organized labor, the union movement. Will Attig is a combat veteran of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. After he returned to civilian life, he completed a program called Helmets to Hardhats that you're going to hear us talk about a lot in this blogcast. He was an apprentice at UA Local 160 in Southern Illinois. And after, frankly, benefiting tremendously from that program and from his relationship with the union, Will started to advocate for programs for other military veterans so that they could have the same kind of opportunity that he had, and in particular that they could find good quality middle-class jobs through organized labor, through the labor movement. In 2017, he was hired to lead the AFL-CIO's Union Veterans Council, which he does to this day, and does a terrific job. So he'll be able to talk broadly about veterans in the labor movement. But to talk more specifically about one of the programs that's most important for veterans in the labor movement, we have Martin Helms, who served for 22 years, still serving, in the Army National Guard, and he's now the leader of Helmets to Hardhats. His union career began as an IBEW apprentice. Then he became a journeyman. He became a foreman. You'll hear him tell his story in some detail. He was the training director for his local apprenticeship program, and then he went on to lead Helmets to Hardhats, a very, very, very important program. So we wanted to give these two military veterans and trade unionists an opportunity to talk about the role that unions played in their lives and the role that unions play in veterans' lives more broadly that help them find a place in the middle class and stability and a future, an economic future. But I was also curious, frankly, about the role that veterans play inside of unions, and you'll hear what Will talk about that in this conversation. So we'll get to that conversation in just a minute, but first, some labor news. So much to talk about, but I'm going to limit myself again, trying to keep this to a short hour. I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon, November 12th, and there have been, sorry about that, it's kind of disgusting to lick my finger like that, but if I'm going to move my notes, I need to be able to do that. I apologize. Maybe we'll edit that out if we can. So there is some big labor news, very big labor news. SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Union in Hollywood, has reached an agreement, a tentative agreement, I should say, with the Hollywood studios. They had a 4-month strike against the Hollywood studios and have finally brought that to an end. The next step in the process is for the members of the union to decide whether they want to ratify the agreement. I think it'll be interesting to contrast how the actors vote with how the Writers Guild's members voted. The Writers Guild's members ratified their agreement with the Hollywood studios after also a very, very long strike, almost the longest strike they've ever had. But the Writers Guild members ratified the agreement with 99% of the vote. 99% of the vote. That is an overwhelming endorsement of the work of the negotiating committee and a declaration of the success of the strike. I want to be honest that I'll be surprised if the actors are able to get to 99%. Not because they weren't successful. I think that a close analysis of the agreement will suggest that the strike was successful for the actors and that they won some protections relating to AI, and they won increased pay, and they won some additional money coming out of streaming, although not the percentage of streaming revenues that they had demanded at the table. But there was some dissent within the union. There was some disagreement within the union. So getting to 99%, I think, will be very difficult. But the question is, will they get to 83%, which is where the Teamsters were when their members ratified the UPS contract? That would still be a remarkable endorsement of the success of the negotiating committee, but even that is a very, very high number. So it'll be interesting to see how that ratification vote goes. A second piece of news coming out of Las Vegas. Also very good news. Unite Here's Culinary Workers and Bartenders Union reached an agreement with the Las Vegas casino hotels just before their strike deadline was going to be reached. That means 35,000 workers, housekeepers, bartenders, front of the house staff, back of the house staff, others are going to are not going to have to strike, and they are going to get what appears to be an excellent deal. In fact, according to the culinary workers, referenced in a New York, not quoted, but referenced in a New York Times story on this topic, said that this agreement represents the largest wage increase those workers have received in the history of the union, the 88-year history of the union. This is the largest wage increase. That is a remarkable, remarkable statement. So let me also say they got a tremendous set of concessions from the casino hotels regarding house cleaning. This had become a tremendous issue coming out of the pandemic. The hotels had changed their business model to not clean hotel rooms every day. Only if the hotel room turned over and new guests came in would they clean it, unless the guest specifically requested it, which I always do because I want those housekeepers to have work, and you should do the same thing. Well, now in Las Vegas, the unions have won strict new mandatory house cleaning rules, room cleaning rules in their contract. And that right there is the power of the union. The unions had lost a lot of members had lost their jobs. Because of this change in the business model by the hotels, the unions were able to negotiate a new arrangement so that business model will go back to the old form where you will have housekeepers cleaning your room every day. And let me just say, if they're not doing it, if you're not in Las Vegas and they're not doing it in your hotel, ask for it, because it's gross. It's gross to not get your hotel room cleaned every day. You should, and also you're putting a housekeeper to work, hopefully in a union wage. Let me just say a couple of points that I wanted to make also about the culinary workers and bartenders settlement tentative agreement. The first is I wrote a piece about asking the question, or trying to answer the question: if unemployment goes up, will strike activity and worker activism decline? Because that is the economic orthodoxy. And I analyzed it, and you can go and read it, and I encourage you to read it. But very interesting point about what happened in Las Vegas. Nevada has the highest unemployment rate in the United States, 5.4%. The national unemployment rate is about 3.9% as we're speaking right now. And yet, the culinary workers and bartenders unions were able to get a great deal. Unite Here was able to get a great deal. Now, there are some reasons for that, and I want you to read my piece to figure out why that is, but it certainly suggests that as a blanket matter, that higher unemployment does not necessarily mean less worker activism, less effective worker activism, less effective worker strike activity. The second thing is our friends at Bloomberg put out an analysis that showed that contract improvements, particularly wage increases over the last 3 years, far outstrip the wage increases that have been seen for union workers since the turn of the century, since 2000, and maybe even before that. I encourage you to go take a look at that Bloomberg analysis. This agreement, and I would argue the SAG-AFTRA agreement, the Writers Guild agreement, the Teamsters agreement, the UAW agreement, and the Kaiser Permanente agreement, all ratify that point. The unions are doing extraordinarily well at the bargaining table right now. That it's partly a payoff to worker activism. It's partly a payoff to tight labor markets. It's partly a payoff to, in some cases, new union strategy, new union leadership, new union bargaining objectives. It's a big improvement, and it'll be interesting to see if that continues. Third piece of news, I'm going to do this on a point of personal privilege. even though I wasn't involved in this organizing drive, it is my alma mater that was involved, and I was really happy to see the results. The graduate workers at Cornell University finished their voting in a union representation election. They were voting whether to be represented by the UE, which represents graduate workers on a number of campuses across the United States right now. The voting was the 7th, 8th, and 9th of November. Today's the 12th of November. And the union won. How much did they win by? I've talked about this, these gaudy results in higher education. How much did the Cornell Graduate Students Union win by? They got 96% of the vote. 96% of the vote. That is awe-inspiring. So we are going to have for you, we've already recorded it, a blogcast about union organizing and worker activism and collective bargaining in higher education. That should be coming very soon. Please keep an eye out for that blogcast. It's going to help to explain what we're seeing in all of these union elections on college and university campuses. And let me just say, one terrific way to make absolutely sure that you are able to find out about great blogcasts like that one and this one is to subscribe to the blog. So go after you finished watching this blogcast, go to the front page of the blog, give us your name, give us your affiliation, give us your email address, and we will send you updates about the content that's on the blog. We'll also send you the weekly download, which is a collection of a couple of dozen stories, articles, opinion pieces, videos, academic studies, anything relating to worker power, collective action, and unions. And we will send that to you once a week, free of charge, into your inbox if you subscribe. So I'm eager to have you do that. But right now, what I'm eager to have you do is to watch this fantastic Veterans Day blogcast with Martin Helms and Will Attig. Enjoy.
You know, Will, when you first came on the screen, when you first came on camera, I thought you were wearing your dress medals on your shirt. It's like, wait, he's wearing his full dress medals with a polo shirt. That can't be right. But then I noticed it's the logo. It's the Union Veterans logo. So a little crazy. You don't ever do that, right?
No. There's I decided when I left the military it was the time to take the uniform off, and that's where I like to leave it in the closet.
Yeah, probably the right decision. So first of all, thanks very much to both of you for your willingness to be with us on this blogcast. We're recording this a few days before Veterans Day. We're gonna publish it probably the Monday after Veterans Day, but it's all about veterans in this conversation, and we're having the conversation with two veterans, and that's perfect. And so let me, Martin, I want to start with you if you don't mind. You were Army National Guard. Are you still in the Guard, or you're not?
Yes.
Are you on reserve or?
Yes. So I'm still in the Army National Guard out of Ohio. 20, I think I'm clicking 24 years somewhere in there of service. So just keep chugging away.
What's your job in the Guard?
So it's truthfully, it all encompasses H2H, the building trades, education and career that I've had, and the Guard. So I am a warrant officer, construction engineer technician, 120 Alpha. In which that scope basically, when the Army deploys in their engineer units and we got to support and sustainment, the engineers come in and they provide that. And I'm kind of the engineer that oversees it all. You can call it a project manager, you can call it an engineer, but in the Army, you're kind of wear many hats to get the mission done. So anything that deals with construction, that's my scope.
Yeah. And have you ever been deployed overseas?
Yes. Yes.
And when were you deployed?
So the latest one was in 2015 and 16, in which we, the engineers get over there and then you just kind of break apart depending on what construction missions are there. So I was up in Iraq for a little bit and then came back to Kuwait, which is kind of the main hub, is how that's operated. And then from Kuwait, I went over to Jordan to upgrade some facilities there during that deployment.
Wow. And Will, I actually don't know what service you were in. What service were you in? And you were deployed during, were you in Iraq or were you in Afghanistan?
So I did multiple deployments during the global war on terror at the very start of it mostly. So I was in the Army infantry. I was going to be a history professor and I decided I wanted to serve my country and wanted to kind of get a little bit of help going to college too. I came from a real poor family. And I signed up. I found myself in Iraq 6 months after I signed the line to join the Army. Went to OIF2 during the surge, during 6 to 8, with one of the more heavily decorated units, but also one of the most heavily hit units since Vietnam, called the Blue Spaders. And it's something that, kind of binds us together, and it's helped me, work to help other veterans since I've gotten out too. It's having that history.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your journeys. You're still serving, Martin, but you've left the military, Will. So I want to talk about your journeys because they're very similar, right? You both became apprentices and you both became journeymen in your unions. So Will, tell us a little bit about how you went from being a service member to being in your union.
Well, I always like to end where I'm at right now, being the executive director of the Union Veterans Council at the AFL-CIO. It's pretty spectacular when I look back at being an infantry sergeant, a journeyman pipe fitter, a kid that was sleeping on my mom's couch when I came home from Iraq, to being able to do some of the things I get to do and sit here and talk with Martin, who leads Helms with the Hardhats, which is a very important part of my story. As I said, I joined the Army when I was 17. I really didn't have a plan to go to night school. And when I left the military in 2010, I always tell people, people think that the streets of Ramadi during the surge was the hardest part of my fight. But the reality of it was the streets of Illinois, right after the Great Recession. And for a year, I struggled with this big bag a lot of veterans have. Not that makes us, any less of people, but we went from being, leading soldiers in combat to now, I dropped out of college because I wasn't really quite ready for it after going, being in war for 7 years. I struggled with finding good employment because there just was such a saturation of the job market, and my skill set. I didn't really know how to explain my skill set to everyday people. And I found myself without a job, a degree, or a future, it seemed like. And one day away from one of the statistics you could think about. And the worst day of my life was being told I couldn't lead 8 people loading soda pop on the back of a truck in a warehouse because I didn't have a college degree. And I tried to explain that I'd led soldiers in combat. Worst day of my life, Seth. And luckily, about a week later, I found out about a program called Helms with the Hardhats. And that program was putting veterans into welding programs and putting us straight into journeyman or into apprenticeship programs with the UA, United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters. And I sat down in a welding booth and I realized my life was changed. I knew I was going to have retirement. They told me about my retirement. They told me I was going to have the stability to just relax and take care of myself, which is incredibly important for veterans. And I chose that day to start helping other veterans get that same opportunity. And I was very lucky to go through an apprenticeship program, become a journeyman, at the same time continue to work. And through having the power of a union card, not only was I a journeyman worker or an apprentice worker, I was able to go and knock on doors and help advocate for more jobs for veterans because of that union card in my pocket.
Yeah. So Martin, what was your pathway? You're still serving, and you sort of went the apprenticeship path while you were in the Guard. So how did that happen? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my story kind of backs up a little further than that. The reason I joined the Guard, much like Will, is, my parents didn't have the money to send us to college. I'm one of 6 kids. They just didn't have that fund. So about my junior year, I would say I was mature for my junior year, but I was like, I need to put a plan together. So I was looking at my options. My father served
junior year. You're saying junior year of high school.
High school.
Junior year of high school. Wow.
Yeah. So this is 1990. This is 1998, 99 year. So anyway, yeah. So my dad served, and I always, always played GI Joes in the backyard, and always just that pride of that. So I looked into that, and at the time, I had a buddy that joined the Ohio Guard, and he's like, "Hey, they'll pay for your college." And I was like, So I looked into it. I joined the Guard my junior year. Went to basic between my junior and senior year. Came back, finished up my senior year, and then did my MOS. This is 2000 training, and then came home in spring of 2001. And then we know how the world changed on September 11th. And then from there, I left for 2 years on a deployment from 2003, 4, and 5. And then when I came home in 2005, that's when Helms to Hardhats crossed my path on a cornfield armory in the middle of Ohio. And I'm not joking. It's literally in the cornfield.
Tell that story. Tell the story of how you came across Helmets to Hardhats.
So it was a post debrief. And this is when the DOD started recognizing that like Will and stuff, we were coming home and our lives were changed, and we really didn't have gainful employment, and they were starting to see the stats from this. So they started doing these post debriefs on employment, what benefits you have available to you, and really trying to put the the stuff out there so you could comprehend it and what to do with it. And Helms to Hardhats was one of those programs. It literally showed up on Armory drill floor. They gathered us all around and they gave a 5 to 10 minute spiel. What intrigued me at that time is in high school, and after I came home from my initial training, I was working in the electrical field already. So I liked doing the electrical field. I told myself I need to get an education in this. I knew the word apprenticeship, but I had no clue where to go. Everyone says, "Are you in an apprenticeship?" No, I didn't know any of that terminology, where to go, and whatnot. So when that passed and they said, "Hey, we can connect you to registered apprenticeship programs and within the construction field, electrical, carpentry, whatever," I immediately locked in and whatnot. So I went home. At the time I was married. I talked to my wife about it, went to the website, filled out the information, and it's really just a closed job board. And it gave me the location where to go in Akron, Ohio. And the rest is really history. I applied, interviewed, got accepted in 2006. And then I started my apprenticeship from 2006, completed in 2010 because I got some advanced standing from my prior experience and college experience. Yeah, to back it up a little bit there. So I was so locked on to advancing myself. The whole reason I joined the Guard was college money. So when I finally got home, I started going to college in the evening and working full time during the day in the electrical field. And I kid you not, people don't believe me, and my wife's the testament to it, but 3 hours of sleep a night, either getting home from school, and then we had one child and then another one on the way. It was just burning the candle at both ends. I am not joking. I wonder how sometimes I did what I did. But, when you're locked on, you want it, you're going to go after it, and you're going to do whatever it takes. So anyway, advanced forward in the apprenticeship from 2006 to 2010, I graduated as an inside wireman for the IBW, and I immediately, went on to be a foreman for a number of years. Deployment came up again in 15, 16, deployed, and at this time I became a warrant officer. So about the 2012 timeframe, I started looking around and said, man, I'm pretty smart at this construction stuff, and I think I can help my country in a better way. So I took the skills I learned from the registered apprenticeship and on-the-job training and my college education too at this time, and said, look, I'm going to go to that next level, and went through warrant officer candidate school, completed that, graduated, and then completed my 120 Alpha schooling. So it really paid dividends in 2015 and 16 when I was deployed downrange. And I kid you not, I was on a project up in Iraq, and I had a Marine, high-ranking Marine, equivalent to a 1-star, come through, and he just looked around. He's this crusty old guy walking the job site, doesn't say a word. He's got his whole staff walking around with them, and we must have walked the job site for 10 minutes, no words. And I'm just like, what is this guy doing? Come on. And he finally turned to us, and I won't say the language he said, being a good Marine. He just basically asked, how do you guys know how to do this? It was a large complex. And I said, look, I kind of explained my background, and I explained, how we taught the troops and whatnot. So there's just it's a huge testament to how, the education from the building trades contribute back to their country downrange, because it is organized training, it's organized labor, and how it all can come together in a very structured format and pay dividends both way. Anyway, I came home from that deployment, and I was like, man, I'm ready to get back in the field. Went back with my employer, and then the opportunity to become the training director of that same registered apprenticeship program I completed in 2010 came up. And I remember receiving the notice, and I said, man, I don't want that headache. I got enough. I'm on a good path. And I had a couple mentors, I would say, call me and say, you probably should look into that. And so they convinced me. I applied, interviewed, and do it. And truthfully, at the time, it wasn't something I really wanted, but I knew I'd be really good at it. Like I knew I could really give back, and I did it. It was one of the best moves I've ever made in my life, to be a training director. And I did that position for about 4.5, 5 years, almost 5 years. And then Helms to Hardhats position came up through another inquiry. And again, a few people said, hey, you probably should do that. And then I took on this position. It's really a Cinderella story to go from a cornfield armory and a 5 to 10 minute conversation and a program that changed your life in so many ways, for my family, myself, and now I get to lead the program. And now really my vision is just give back, and show that, like Will, the opportunity that exists within the building trades, especially to our veterans. It's such a hand in glove fit for the way we operate to the way the military operates. It's
Yeah.
very parallel.
I'm going to want to get into that with you. There are two
Yeah.
things that I wanted to say. First of all, I feel like I should be interviewing your wife because she's a saint. I've never even met the woman. I should have her like on a poster for this event. I mean, wow. What that woman has put up with.
Yeah. And you talk about, I've been, between training and deployments, I think for a reserve component, I think I'm pushing 6 years of active duty within a 24 span, and it's coming and going, your drill weekends and keeping up with everything. She's the same, and 4 kids, by the way, on top of that. So, she sometimes, she is the Eleanor Roosevelt per se. She's the one back there making sure I can be the poster child, but everything's I couldn't be where I'm at without her, for sure.
We should make a note for next Veterans Day. I should only be talking to military spouses.
That's probably a pretty good story. That's probably a pretty good story.
But here's the second thing. I wanted to say is that President Biden talks all the time about how apprenticeship is an alternative to college, but apprenticeship is just as hard and just as long as college. You took 4 years in the apprenticeship and you had advanced credit that made that possible, but then you also went on to college. So you can do both apprenticeship and college, but apprenticeship can also be an alternative to college. But it's a really serious commitment, right? This is not you go for 6 weeks and you get a training certificate. You really are committing yourself to the career and learning a lot. So I appreciate you telling that story. So Will, let me come back to you. And I'm so struck by the fact that both of you came from, let's say, modest backgrounds, working class communities. That's true of a lot of veterans. A very large percentage of veterans come out of working class communities, poor communities. And one of the most important things that we can do for those veterans, for those service members and veterans, is to help them gain some economic stability in their lives so that they can live a life of dignity, right? That's the least that we owe to veterans. So we'll talk a little bit about what kinds of unions or which particular unions, in addition to the building trades, but feel free to talk about the trades as well, because they've got a great story here. But which kinds of unions emphasize veterans in their work? And are there unions that you're working to sort of bring into the fold so they're a little more deeply involved with veterans?
No, I mean, it's a great question, and it's something that I love to talk about. And it's kind of like this unknown entity inside of the labor movement of what high percentage of veterans are unionized in this country. And I love to talk about the building trades because I'm part of a building trades union. But the reality of it, it's really across the board, Seth. When we look at veteran statistics and labor statistics, when it comes to working class, working veterans, over 1.3 million of them are in a union, and that's a pretty high percentage.
Wow!
And we have a union density of over 15% as an entire country. When you look at states like Washington State, it's over 30% union density in one population, and a large population of veterans. New York, over 30% union density. I would say that if you looked across the states, we have some of the highest union densities per any demographic in the entire labor movement. I mean, you can just look at our leadership. We can look at past leadership, executive board, things like that. From across the table, veterans find good employment. They look for stability when they come home. I always like to talk about the good side of veterans along with the bad. We always hear about the bad side of veterans, but the reality of it, there's a third of our veterans that leave the military every year that exceed. They go out, they become leaders, they business owners, things like that. There's another third that just kind of shows up and they go back to work. They serve their country and they work. They find the best jobs they can. They usually find programs to get them a little bit of a heads up here and there. But then there's a third of veterans that really, really struggle. And that's the one that we really focus on when it comes to our program. So when you look at the federal workplace, right, there's more veterans that work in the federal workplace than any other place combined between DOD, VA, post offices. The highest percentage of union density is in transportation, where I forgot exactly the percentage of union density in transportation is. But the reality of it, you can go to any union, you can find veterans from every demographic in there. And it's something that I've really tried to work in the last 5 years to make the word union veteran known, and a powerful tool. Because again, like Martin said, he became a journeyman. He became a foreman. He led. Veterans are wired to serve if you give them the opportunity. But at the same time is when they don't have the opportunity, right? When they face an extra amount of socioeconomic problems on top of their on top of their service or top of their position in the world, you see a lot of problems. You see that 35% of all veterans that work today make less than $31,000 a year. That's less than the minimum wage, or the $15 minimum wage. So there's a lot of problems in our community. And when you look at some of the big issues that we look at, veteran suicide, homelessness, some of the many family problems that we have when it comes to the veterans community, you can really focus in on socioeconomics and the ability to have stability and dignity with a good paying job. It's not just a job that you get, $100 at the end of the day. You get benefits, you get stability, you get I always say the chance to live the American dream you fought for. And unfortunately, so many workers that came from poor communities like mine, they don't have those opportunities when they go back home. And that's where Helmets of Hardhats, that's where many of the other training programs in the labor movement can really help fill that niche.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a perfect segue, because my next question for Martin is, tell us how it works. How does Helmet to Hardhats connect with transitioning service members, folks coming out of the military, but also with veterans more broadly? And then tell us the process that you take them through.
Yeah, so it's truly simple, in its easiest format. So basically, we run a closed job board. You basically have to be either a union affiliation within the construction trades. So there's 15 of the construction trades unions, or one of the signatory contractors of those construction trade unions. If you're part of that, you apply, you get accepted, and then you can post your opportunities on our job board. The outreach within the DoD space happens in tremendous amount of ways. So that could be as simple as a job fair. That could be a yellow ribbon ceremony that we just attend and a post debrief, much like how I was told about the program. The internet, social media. We work with a lot of the transition programs through the military. So Soldier for Life, the different TAPS programs, we were in there. We work with the on-base coordinators.
Just for the uninitiated, TAP is
Oh,
Transition
we
Assistance
can turn this into an
Program.
acronym more right now.
I know it.
Hey.
You guys, I didn't go back and correct you on DoD and all that other stuff.
Department of
But
Defense.
TAP is Transition Assistance Program, which is a joint program with the Labor Department, the Veterans Affairs Department, and the DoD to help service members who are leaving the military to find civilian employment. Okay, I just wanted to explain that. Do a little to English translation.
Yeah. So, and a little more to that, TAPS, is, basically when you exit military service, because back in I would say early 2000s, they identified that, hey, unemployment rate is high, and the DoD has to pay for that, right? So when you come off active duty service, if you don't have gainful employment, you're not employed, you're collecting unemployment. So that's a problem that was going up. So they put these programs in place to really help before you exit military service. I was going to use end in time ETS real quick, and anyway, but before you end your time in service, they try to connect you and make sure you have a game plan or gainful employment when you exit, so you don't have that unemployment. Because I want to back up a little bit to Will's point. Gainful employment avoids so many stats that are out there. So many stats. If you can't pay your bills, you have relationship problems, you can't pay your bills. Next thing you know, you're getting depressed, you're thinking about suicide and drinking and drugs. And there's so many veteran stats that are out there that the pyramid of that is just get gainful employment. A lot of that is unavoidable or is avoidable. So and the unions are that opportunity to gainful employment, because that's our rock. That's what we believe in. So digress from that. So how we connect it's through those different transition programs, outreach. We work a lot with Hiring Our Heroes, the different transition programs, and the on-base coordinators when they have specific job fairs there, and they know about us. And really, it's about relationships, getting out there, shaking hands, letting people know the opportunity, then being open-minded to the other opportunity, saying, hey, college is not the only route here. There's this thing called register apprenticeship and whatnot. So it's really that. Social media, internet is huge anymore. Back when I came from, it was a face-to-face. You really didn't think about Google or any of that. Right now, some people just Google it. They'll come home and they'll be like, Google that, and we're pop right up there. We're always on top of it. Make sure the analytics make us at the top of that page, and we get a lot of return on that. So it is simple as driving our vehicles down the road. I am not kidding you. Our vehicles are very well branded, and we cross paths with someone, and it starts a conversation. And that conversation either is direct to that person or it's second nature to someone else passing it on. To give you an idea of the numbers that we're hitting right now this year in our marketing, we'll break probably 15,000 career seekers that want to get within the building trades. So these, and I always look up at that, I'm like 15,000. I was one of, that. I just think about that individual's lives that were on the verge of changing and whatnot. So yeah, we're growing. Our numbers are up 33%, and a lot of it has to do with our different strategies. And I can tell you, there is not a fixed strategy. What might work in 23, it may not work in 24. It has to be adjusted. So we're constantly trying to stay on our toes and look at the data and look outside the box and how we can connect.
Seth, can I say, I apologize, can I jump in?
No, go ahead, please.
It's one of the most joyful things that I can do in my life. I promise you this, is that when I find a electrician who's been working a non-union electrician job, that's been out of the Army since Fallujah, in 2008 or 2010, and I get to connect them with helmets or hard hats, and then they get to see what we're talking about when it comes about gainful employment, and the difference is spectacular. And it's something that when people know that you work on getting veterans employment, your phone is constantly going off because someone's got a cousin. But that's what we like to say. We don't want to just talk to veterans, right, Martin? We want to talk to the mothers and the family members and say, look, if you know someone that has left the military and they're not quite sure what they're doing, like, this is an incredible spot for it. Whether it's Helms, the hard hats, or the seafarers, there's quite a few other ones, and it's just getting the word out is important. But as I said, it's one of the greatest parts of my job, plain and simple, is to be able to connect those folks.
Can I just say, you just said the magic word, because the Seafarers was the union I worked for right out of college. I worked for them for 5 years, and it's the Seafarers International Union. Great program. They have a terrific apprenticeship program of their own, and they do training all the way up. You can climb all the way through the career ladder of any of the departments on a ship. It's really fantastic. So, Martin, I want to stay with you for just a minute, and I want to talk about what is one of the biggest issues in veterans employment. And you referred to it earlier when you threw out the acronym MOS. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So one of the challenges that transitioning service members, and I think also fairly recent veterans, have is helping civilian employers to understand the skills that they've acquired in military service. Because the Department of Defense, we can criticize them in a whole bunch of different ways. They're one of the most effective, comprehensive training organizations, certainly in the federal government, maybe in the world. They're endlessly training people and helping them to acquire new skills. They have to, right? They live and die by the skills that people acquire through their training. So for our audience, the MOS that you refer to is a military occupational
specialty.
Specialty. And there's also military occupational codes that are 9-digit numbers that not only classify a job, but also let people know what skills you have that are necessary to the job. So you could have multiple codes or specialties that you're qualified for. I'm telling you something you already know very well. The problem is that the folks in the military understand this system great, but civilian employers have no idea. Many of them have no idea what the MOS or the MOC tells them. They don't know what skills come with a military job. So how does Helmets to Hard Hats try to address that very difficult issue of translating military skills, military knowledge, military experience to civilian skills and knowledge and experience, or most importantly, to civilian jobs?
Yeah. So let's go back to the MOS real quick and set a baseline there. So, MOS, depending on when you enter the military, you got to pass a pre-examination. Basically, they test your educational level, your medical level, whatever, and then they come up with this thing. So during that examination, what they call the ASVAB, you basically get tested on your abilities, educational. We're not going to go into that too much, and you get a score. And then from that score, you get to choose whatever the DoD has decided a qualifying score gets for that job skill. Okay. And some of them you need to be pretty smart, and some of them, I wouldn't say you're dumb, because all of them have to have a minimal level. But there's some differences there. But uh, I want people to understand that, and that where this leads into is in our job board, when the service member fills out their profile, they put in their MOS, and then our job board translates that to civilian terms, exactly what the difficulty that we have, and that stays up to date. So we keep MOS has changed, by the way, so if you were a 21 Romeo 20 years ago, which is an interior electrician in the Army, that's now 12 Romeo. We keep them both in there. Okay. So and that changes over time. But anyways, we take that basically from military lingo to civilian digestive terms so people understand that. And ours adjusts per leadership level. So if you're like a private and you're a 12 Romeo versus a sergeant that's a 12 Romeo, that's a little bit different. You basically went from just being a worker to being in charge of a team. And how do we put that in civilian terms? So that's what we do. Going back to the MOSs in the building trades alone, we always gravitate towards what we call the engineer MOSs. Those are your construction MOSs, your job skills. We actually get more people from the combat arms, your 11 Bravos, your infantry people, than we do from the engineer trades. And it's because they are the masses. But two, when you leave as a combat arm, you're like, hey, I just learned how to either shoot stuff really good or blow stuff up really good. What's that really translate into the civilian sector? Well, that's either cop, maybe firefighter, maybe, and that's where a lot of the trouble is, and I would say I would like to do a study or look at the data. That third that, Will was talking about, I bet is the majority of that, because there is not a good, for say, job occupation in the civilian sector that you can do that, right? There is some, but not everyone's going to get that. What's cool about the
Right.
construction trades is because of the parallels of the way we operate, the way we educate, and the way we believe in the unity, right? It's the same. So once these combat arms people get in and they see it and they're like, wait a minute, we got the pay structures, we got a chain of command, we got all this stuff. Oh, we do on the job training. That's what we did there. We walk, crawl, run, right? So and they grasp it and they get a hold of it and they love it. And we do very, very well with the combat arms. We do good with all MOSs, but the combat arms is by far always our leading one. And that's why the Army and the Marines are always our leading career seekers, because they are combat arms heavy.
So I want to ask you, if you don't mind, so the translator that you're talking about, is that done technologically, or do you have people who do that? How does it work?
So it's all automated. So basically you punch it in your MOS, what rank you are, and then it translates that into a resume. And that resume comes out in 3 different formats. Resumes are not really a big deal for H2H when they're applying for registered apprenticeship, but I can tell everyone, it's nice icing on the cake. I submit it. It can't hurt you as part of a document. But yeah, and especially for our signatory contractors, right? So they see that resume may be a little more important than our union apprenticeships that are looking at it. But regardless, it translates it over into what their abilities are. And it also tenure. It looks into that, how long you've been doing it for.
That's fantastic. That's really terrific. All right, Will, so I want to broaden it out from job seeking and job placement to the role of veterans in unions. And sort of how does having veterans in their ranks affect unions? So, for example, do veterans make organizing easier? Do they make it more likely? Do we know if veterans tend to be more active union members than non-veterans or than the average union member? Or are they just like everyone else? Some of them are active, some of them are not active. You know how it is in a union local. There are some folks who just want to do their job. They'll show up at election time, they'll show up at contract ratification time, but that maybe they'll show up at the holiday party, but that's about it. Is it your experience that veterans are different in their unions, or are they just like everybody else and great to have them in because it's always good to have more union members?
Well, I'll go first if you allow. I'll go first on this.
Yeah, I will happily let you throw it in there, and then I've got data points on this. But yes, the answer is yes.
So my answer to this is that in the military, you were taught in the very, very early stages of what I call interdependence, right? it is no longer about you. It is about your left and right. It's about the organization and your will to put yourself forward to make that a better place for your left and right and that organization. I mean, that's ingrained to you. You don't fail, the team fails, right? So you want the team to succeed. So I think because of that nature alone, when you do get into some societies of work, the unions, your almost natural attribute is to say I will other than I can. Like, and it may not be everything, right? For me, it was heavy on the educational end. Obviously being a training director, putting the long hours, going out of the way for people. But people want to be involved. They want to do a good job. They want to be teamwork. They want to help the others out before themselves. And it's just their natural character. I can't count the sacrifice that an individual puts, and it's almost hard to talk to a normal person about it, because they're like, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself in front of others? But I'm telling you, it's just ingrained into you. Some of people come with it naturally. Some people, it's just the way they operate. They see the greater good of team.
So we've got a new little set of organizing tools in the Union Veterans Council, and one of the things that we really started to do 5 years ago is to give veterans a platform, the tools and platforms to be more part of the labor movement once we give them one of these great jobs, right? Once I got into to my apprenticeship programs and I got sent on my very first job, they told me to organize the toolboxes and the tool connexes. I came back, everything was done like it was a combat mission, and they were very surprised. So then I said, what's next, right? And they said, well, we need some folks to volunteer to do a community action project. And I'm like, well, I'll go do it. I don't even need to be told to do it, because it was ingrained in my body. So my goal is, along with it, is that it's something that's always happened in the labor movement, but we're working to put a name on it through the Union Veterans Council, of organizing veterans across the country to get more involved. We say we like to engage, educate, and then mobilize our veterans to be part of the labor movement and their community, and it is much easier. I feel sometimes I talk with some of my other organizing friends that organize groups, to get veterans to get involved. It's much easier, but mostly because they're already there. When you start, I remember you saw Michelle Pearson from that works on all the data of organizing.
Yeah,
I love to get to work with people like that. But when you start to look at our high propensity volunteers in the AFL-CIO, when you look at the people who show up day in and day out, the amount of people who volunteer for campaigns or charity, veterans make a high percentage of that when you start to cross-reference it. And that's something, but again, it's built into our heart. It's who we are. Now, there's definitely some veterans that don't get involved at all, right? I'm not, but there's that third that wants to succeed. And when you give a veteran to do more, an ability to do more, I think that's one of the most important things that we can do. We see a lot of stagnation in the veterans community when we have problems. So the more veterans get involved, whether it's in our organization, we have 4 pillars to it. It's membership engagement force. Like, how do we get these veterans engaged, understand they're part of something bigger, and they can come together? Beer and barbecue. If you can put a Marine in a room with a bunch of Army guys and start making fun of him or her for eating crayons, everybody's going to come together very quickly. I promise to.
Wait. Hang on. Eating crayons.
Okay,
is there something I don't know about how the
Army
and the Marines?
Exactly.
I don't know that one. Tell me what that is.
Organizing test. So there's a lot of inner Army jokes, right? That past generations, that no matter who you are, if you're hanging out with a president of a union or a CEO of a corporation, you make one of these jokes, everyone's going to laugh. The Marines are kind of crayon chewers, right? They're not the smartest of the bunch, right?
I see. I got it.
When you put a group of veterans in a room together, they start joking.
He said it, not me.
I don't believe it. It's mythology, but if I can use an organizing tool, I'm going to use it, right? So you can bring people together quickly, and then we try and get them to do our next step, which is community engagement, to show America where our veterans are. We're moving up on it. Veterans Day is happening. This is coming out on Veterans Day. There might be a government shutdown in the next couple of days, right? And that's going to put hundreds of thousands of veterans at risk of not having paychecks, being furloughed, losing money. Even if they get that stuff back, they're going to face problems. So one of our goals is to engage the community and show, hey, if we're going to yell and scream about and celebrate Veterans Day, maybe the day before, let's think about what could happen here in a week. And then we also get our veterans involved in policy and legislation. Veterans are a group of people that policy and legislation plays an oversized role, whether it's benefits, making sure that we've got good GI bills, making sure we've got the PACT Act. I got to spend a couple of nights out on the Capitol Hill, a couple of months ago, trying to get a bill passed to make sure we don't have problems like Agent Orange. But we had veterans doing that all over the country. And then the last thing is using our veterans to give them leadership, to get more involved in, whether it's making sure bills get passed or, strategic campaigns. Our veterans love to do that kind of thing. And that's one of the things that I love about my job is giving those tools and platforms for veterans to do more when they get home, because they want to do it. We just got to figure out how to make sure they've got the tools to do it.
Yeah. So I love that answer, both of your answers, because, superficially, people think of the military and the union movement as being sort of ideologically incompatible, right? Not being able to fit together because, they think of the union movement as being a bunch of super duper left-wing socialists and think of the military as being a bunch of right-wing, very conservative folks, with crew cuts and take life very, very, very seriously, and Fox News watchers and whatever else it is. And that's not right about the union movement. It's not right about the military and veterans. And so there's actually a lot of commonality and a lot of opportunity for veterans to succeed in the union movement and for the union movement to succeed with veterans. But what you just did is explain that, there's real opportunity here. There's real opportunities for community leadership, for sticking together, for showing solidarity, right? It's unity in the military, it's solidarity in the labor movement. I think that's so important. All right, so here's how I want to close this out. And it's going to be an open-ended question. I really just want to hear what both of you have to say about this. And Martin, I'll start with you. So you're both veterans. Actually, Martin, you're still active service, right? If guards counts as active service. You're both military involved individuals. Maybe that's the way I should say it. You're both working with veterans in the labor movement, and it's Veterans Day, or almost Veterans Day. So what should union and non-veteran union, what should veteran union members and non-union veteran, I'm going to start that again. See, I told you, we don't mind mistakes here. That's because your host makes a lot of mistakes. Okay. Think about unions. Think about non-veteran union members. What do they need to know this Veterans Day about their veteran union siblings? Martin, let's start with you.
Man, everyone has a story, good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, from their military service. And I always tell people from my personal experience, I have a lot more positive than negative out of my experience in the military. It's not been all, bean bags and burritos per se. There's been a lot of difficulties, family within the service, your friends to your left and right. But they all have a story. And I think I always give them, you don't know their story, just thank them for their service. You don't know what angels they have and you don't know what demons they have, and they've come to, hopefully, to a point in their life that they've moved on from that, or at least embraced it and learned from it, and just thank them for their service. And don't expect a reply. I know I always have a tough time, oh, thank you for your service. And I try to, it's not that we don't want it. We just, I don't know. I just have a tough time accepting compliments for that because it's just our nature. I just wanted to be part of something bigger. I don't mind the sacrifice. It's been better to me than that. I don't know, just thank them for their service and understand that they came from probably places that you probably won't be able ever to relate to unless you walked in those boots, literally, or understand. And just, if you can comprehend that you'll never understand, I think, and thank them for their service and show appreciation in some way, somehow, thank you, and whatever that may be. I think that's the best you can do, and have a conversation with them. At first, they may be a little rash and be like, oh, thank you, whatever. But some of them will open up and they actually enjoy it because they don't get to vent too much other than their Marine friends when they're sharing crayons. They get to open up, and that's why we gravitate that. You walk into a room, you don't know anybody that's a service member or walk into a room, and as soon as you find someone that's served, you instantly have a conversation that could go on for hours. We talk about places and people you've seen or been or crossed paths with, or man, we were two fobs away from each other at the same time. I don't know how many times I've crossed paths with that I literally had an apprentice put an application in when I was a training director. When I was in Jordan, that was at the same time was in Jordan as me. Never knew the guy. We were on the same footprint, a postage stamp of a place, and he was on the same post, and I didn't know him there, and it was just weird. But you just never know. Just thank them. Don't try to comprehend where they came from, but and maybe have a conversation with them.
That's a great answer. All right, Will. So what should unions and non-veteran union members know about your veteran union siblings?
Well, I think that what I like to say always is that veterans need to talk to each other first and foremost. So if you're a non-union veteran, listen to both of us talking as veterans to you today. And if you're a family member of a veteran that's struggling, listen to us and think about this. Maybe share it with them and explain to them that they might have been working on a job that they didn't get the dignity that I know that they deserve. They may not have got the benefits and the type of I guess value that we give as people, because we give it 100% of our times. And it's hard for us sometimes to get outside of a hole. So when a veteran has a job that's been in there for a long time, it's hard for them to quit. But I'd always say, if you are a veteran listening and you're non-union, look for a union contract. If you get a chance to join a union, join one, because it's about the camaraderie of our siblings coming together, actually getting the fight again, right? Fight for the bigger and broader purpose of this country, which is make it a more perfect union for every single one of us. The difference between a non-union veteran and a veteran when it comes to just pure pay is over $12,000 a year on average. So if you're in a union and you're a veteran, you're going to be making on average $12,000 a year more than your non-union sibling. As veterans who fight for each other, we want to bring everybody else. I always say we want to pull everybody else up. I don't want to just pull my bootstraps up. I want to pull everybody's bootstraps up. I want to grab my buddies and do it together. And there's a way to do that, and that's with a union card. And you may be in a union that's not perfect, and you've got problems with that union. Be a leader. Be the leader that they taught you in basic training. Step up and make it right. That's many of the things that we can do. And if you're a veteran and you're struggling, talk to people who may not understand you. I just returned from Ukraine a few weeks ago, doing a visit around the veterans community of Ukraine. And I was struck that almost everybody in the country understood how I felt when I heard a rocket or I heard a bang. And it really made me think that when I came home, not many people understood who I was. They didn't understand that I needed a job first and foremost. They didn't know that just putting a yellow sticker on the back of their car helped out. So to me, try to get to understand our veterans a little bit more. And if you are veterans and try and make your friends and family understand you just a little bit more. I think it's incredibly important on this Veterans Day.
Great. Will Attig, Martin Helms, fantastic discussion as I knew it would be. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Seth.
Well, that was a really good one. Thanks for hanging around. Thanks for watching that terrific blogcast with Will and Martin. I'm just here to remind you that you can't watch them. You can listen to these blogcasts not only as a podcast on the Power at Work blog, you can do it there, but you can also listen or download these blogcasts from every commercial podcast provider. Spotify, Google, Apple, Overcast, they're available on all of them. So you can go search Power at Work, go to those commercial podcast providers, search Power at Work, and you'll find every blogcast that we have done so far in podcast form available to you to listen. In addition, I'm really eager to have you follow us on social media. We are at Power at Work blog on Twitter X, also on Threads. We're at Power at Work on Instagram and TikTok. You can find our Power at Work blog pages on LinkedIn and Facebook. Just search Power at Work blog, for example, on LinkedIn, and you will find us. Follow us there, and if you want to communicate with us, send us a direct message through social media so we'll know you're there. We got some fantastic material coming your way, content that's coming your way, posts, blogcasts, podcasts, other material. We're really, really eager to have you see it all. So subscribe, follow us on social media, keep checking back here to the blog. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you back on the blog again very soon.